I didn't go to the Blue Canary because I thought Dan was cheating. I went because I missed him in that low, stubborn way that settles under your ribs when the person you love starts arriving home like a visitor, warm, affectionate, but already halfway gone. He'd been out with coworkers 3 Thursdays in a row. Not impossible. Dan was friendly, generous, the type who'd chat with strangers in a grocery line and somehow leave with a new lunch buddy. Still, the pattern had started to feel like a door he kept closing gently in my face. He'd come home smelling like citrusy beer and someone else's cologne clinging to his jacket, cheeks flushed with laughter that didn't include me. He'd kiss my forehead and ask about my day like a good boyfriend, but his eyes would drift to the window, to his phone, to some place beyond our apartment. When my friend Maris texted me a fuzzy photo of a neon sign and wrote, "Blue Canary karaoke is wild tonight," I stared at it longer than I meant to. The Blue Canary was 20 minutes away, tucked into a strip of old brick buildings that still pretended they were glamorous. I'd never been. Dan had never mentioned it, and yet my thumb hovered over the keyboard like it already knew what I was going to do. I told myself it was romantic, a surprise, a little found you moment. I put on cherry lipstick and the fitted black sweater dress Dan liked, the one that made him look at me twice and then pretend he hadn't. I pulled my hair back in a sleek, low ponytail because it made me feel sharp, put together, like a person who could handle surprises. Outside, the air was damp and cold with that early spring indecision. The streetlights made the wet pavement look polished. My breath showed up briefly and vanished. I drove with my shoulders tense, rehearsing the scene I expected. Dan at a table, laughing with coworkers, me tapping his shoulder, him turning and lighting up. Easy, normal. The Blue Canary's windows glowed a murky blue. When I opened the door, warmth and sound hit me at once. Laughter, overlapping voices, the bright clatter of glasses, and the thump of bass that made the floor feel alive. The air smelled like cider, perfume, and that particular karaoke bar sweetness. Spilled sugar, old upholstery, anticipation. It was packed. People crowded around small tables, faces lit by beer signs and the stage spotlight. Someone on stage was belting out a rock song with the confidence of someone who didn't know or care how off-key they were. Their friends screamed anyway, love doing its loudest work. I scanned the room immediately, eyes skating over heads. My pulse ticked higher with each second I didn't see Dan. There was a childish panic in it, like I'd misread everything, like I'd come to the wrong place, like I'd mistaken his Thursdays for something they weren't. The song ended to raucous applause. The host, a woman in sequins with a clipboard, leaned into the mic and announced the next performer with theatrical delight. "All right, Blue Canary, you know her, you love her. Give it up for Danielle." The name landed in my ear with a strange, familiar weight, like a word you've heard in a dream and then forgotten. Danielle. The crowd clapped in a way that sounded like recognition, like welcome. A figure stepped out from the side of the stage and my brain stalled, refusing to assemble what my eyes were offering. Long hair first, soft waves that moved as she walked. Then the sheen of an emerald dress that caught the light like water. Black heels, the click of them clear even over the chatter. A hand lifted to adjust the mic, fingers tipped with dark, glossy polish. Then she looked up. Dan's face rearranged. His eyes, those warm brown eyes I'd watched crinkle with laughter on our couch, were framed by lashes that looked darker, fuller. His mouth, familiar shape, familiar curve, was colored with a soft, deep tone that made it look more deliberate, more present. His cheekbones caught the light differently. He wasn't hidden behind anything. He was revealed by it. And the way he stood was different. Not hunched or defensive like Dan sometimes got in crowds. Danielle stood with her shoulders relaxed and her chin lifted like the world belonged to her, like she belonged to herself. My hand found the back of an empty chair and gripped. I felt heat rush to my face, then drain, leaving me cold and buzzing. My mind scrambled for explanations. Costume, drag theme night, dare. But nothing about her read as a joke. She didn't look like she was performing femininity as comedy. She looked like she'd practiced being seen. The music started, slow, soulful piano. Danielle leaned in and sang the first line like she meant every syllable. I'd heard Dan sing in the car, harmonizing to the radio like it was effortless, but this voice had a different kind of ease. It filled the room without straining. It sounded like a secret finally getting permission to exist. People quieted. Phones rose to record. A few folks whispered, "Yes, Danielle," like a chant. Danielle smiled at the encouragement, wide and bright, and kept going, turning the song into a confession the whole room could hold. I should have been furious. I should have felt only betrayal. Instead, my feelings crashed into each other so hard I didn't know which one to grab first. Shock, yes. Hurt, yes, because how could he keep this from me? But beneath that, sharp and humiliating, was jealousy. Not of the dress, not of the attention. Jealousy that Danielle existed where I couldn't reach her, that she'd been living in a part of Dan's life I'd never been invited into. a part of him that looked freer than the man who kissed my forehead before bed and fell asleep with a faint frown between his brows. Danielle finished the song on a steady, controlled note and stepped back into the applause as if she'd earned it, because she had. She thanked the crowd with a playful wave, accepted the host's compliments with a grin, and walked off stage like she was glowing from the inside out. I moved without thinking, weaving through bodies. I wanted to catch him, her, before she slipped away into the crowd, before she turned into a story I told myself later to make sense of what I'd seen. But the bar was a living maze, and people shifted constantly, laughing, hugging, singing along to the next song. For a moment, I lost Danielle near the hallway by the bathrooms. My stomach tightened. Then I saw her again, and the sight made my jealousy flare so hot it felt like embarrassment. A man stood near the side of the stage, leaning against the wall like he belonged there. Mid-30s maybe, clean cut in a way that still read dangerous. Dark hair, crisp shirt, expensive watch catching the light. He held 2 drinks. When Danielle approached, he handed one to her with an intimate smile. Not sloppy flirtation, not drunken grabbing. A quiet confidence that implied familiarity. Danielle accepted the drink and leaned in, speaking close to his ear. He laughed. His eyes traveled over her with appreciation so obvious I felt it in my skin. He touched her elbow lightly. Question, not claim. And Danielle didn't pull away. She tilted her head toward him as if listening in a private language. They looked like a pair, like a script. The torch song in my chest changed pitch. Possessiveness rose, irrational, raw. And then, even more confusing, desire followed it. I watched the man's attention latch onto Danielle and felt a twist in my stomach that wasn't just fear of losing Dan. It was wanting Danielle for myself, wanting her closeness, her shine, her confidence, wanting her to look at me like that. The man said something that made Danielle bite her lip, a quick flash of nerves, and then she nodded. He gestured toward the door. Danielle set her glass down and smoothed the front of her dress like she was preparing to be presented. Presented. That word sharpened everything. They started toward the exit. He walked slightly behind her, one hand hovering near the small of her back without touching, escorting in that old-fashioned way that made my jaw clench. I followed. Outside, the night air was colder than it had looked through the window. Streetlights painted everything damp gold. The man and Danielle paused near the curb. He pulled off his coat and held it open for her. Danielle slipped into it. He adjusted it on her shoulders with an ease that made my hands curl into fists. Danielle turned to say something. He leaned down, murmuring into her ear. She shivered, then laughed softly. Something in me snapped. Dan. Her head whipped around. Under the streetlight, the makeup looked even more careful, more real. Her eyes went wide, and suddenly there was Dan, panic flickering behind Danielle's poise. The man turned too, expression shifting from surprise to quick assessment. He didn't look afraid. He looked curious. Danielle, Dan swallowed. Cynthia. My name came out like a breath, like a secret being forced into daylight. What are you doing here? I stopped a few feet away, close enough to smell a mix of perfume and the familiar soap from our bathroom. My voice sounded too bright, too tight. I came to surprise you. Danielle's posture faltered under the coat, shoulders drawing in slightly like she wanted to shrink back into the night. The man cleared his throat politely. You know each other? Yes, Dan said quickly. Then, softer, to me. I should have said, I'm his girlfriend. I should have staked a claim. Instead, what came out was the truth of what I'd been unable to stop feeling. You were incredible, I said to Danielle, voice cracking. Up there. Danielle blinked hard, eyes shining. The man's brows lifted slightly, as if he hadn't expected that. I didn't want you to see, Danielle whispered. I'm glad I did, I said, and the sentence startled me because it was true even through the pain. The man took a step back. I can give you space, he offered, voice careful. Thank you, I said without looking at him, because my focus was on Danielle, on the tremor in her hands, on the way she seemed to be holding herself together with sheer will. You lied to me, I said, and this time the hurt arrived fully, sharp as ice. You've been doing this, and you didn't tell me. Danielle's eyes closed briefly. I didn't know how. And leaving with him? I nodded toward the man. That was your plan? Danielle flinched. It's complicated. I heard myself inhale, heard the wetness of it. Do you want to go with him? Danielle stared at me like the question was both a trap and a lifeline. The man, still a few steps away, shifted, his expression tight. Danielle looked down at the pavement. I wanted to, she admitted, voice tiny. Sometimes I want to, as Danielle. The honesty hit like a wave. The sensible part of me wanted to crumble, to let heartbreak swallow the whole night. But under it, in my blood and bones, was that stubborn, shocking desire. And what about me? I asked, voice breaking. Danielle's gaze snapped up. You're my life, she whispered, and it sounded like it cost her something to say it out loud. The man spoke softly. Danielle, we don't have to. Stop, I cut in, sharper than I meant. He stilled immediately, hands lifted in surrender. I stepped closer to Danielle. I'm jealous, I said, and the confession burned. Not of the clothes, not of you, of him getting to be with you like this, of strangers getting you like this. I didn't even know I wanted this version of you, and now I feel like someone stole something from me. Danielle's lips parted. Her eyes went glossy with tears. Cynthia? And I swallowed hard, cheeks blazing. I'm attracted to you, like this. Silence fell between us like a held breath. Danielle blinked. You are? I nodded once, small, furious at how vulnerable I felt. Yes, and it makes me angry because I want you and I didn't even know you existed. The man's gaze flicked away respectfully, as if giving us privacy with his eyes. Danielle's shoulders shook once. A tear slipped down her cheek, cutting through makeup. She wiped it quickly, smearing a little mascara like proof she was real. Are you Dan right now or Danielle? I asked gently, because if we were going to do this, I needed language. What do you want me to call you? Danielle looked down at the emerald dress peeking from the coat, at her shoes, at her painted nails. Danielle, she whispered, when I'm like this, Danielle feels right. The name settled into the night air, solid and bright. I glanced at the man finally. Who are you? He hesitated, then offered. Marcus. His voice was careful. We've met here a few times. We've talked. I didn't know Danielle had someone. Danielle flinched at the word someone, like it made everything more complicated. I kept it separate, Danielle admitted quickly, shame sharpening her tone. I didn't tell him. I felt the weight of that compartmentalization, the way fear forces you to build walls inside your own life. I took a breath that tasted like cold metal. Marcus, I said, did you treat her well? Marcus met my gaze steadily. Yes, he said simply. Always. I like Danielle, but I won't be part of anything that hurts her. It didn't make me like him, but it made me respect the shape of his boundaries. I turned back to Danielle. Come home with me, I said, voice trembling. Not because I want to control you, because I want to talk. I want the truth. I want to stop being the last person to know you. Danielle's face crumpled with relief so intense it looked like exhaustion. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Marcus's disappointment flashed, then he tucked it away with practiced grace. Text me tomorrow? He asked Danielle gently. Danielle looked at me like a question. Permission, consent, a new kind of honesty, right there in the open. My stomach twisted, but I nodded. Yes, I said. Text him, but we're going to talk about what this is. Danielle nodded quickly. Tomorrow, she told Marcus. Good night, Cynthia, Marcus said. Good night, Danielle. We walked to my car in silence. Danielle's heels clicked carefully on wet sidewalk. Without the stage, without the crowd, her confidence dimmed. I could see how much armor performance had been. Here, she was exposed, just a person in a dress, trembling beneath someone else's coat. In the car, Danielle stared out the window. I drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles white, as if grip could keep me steady. My heart kept slamming in my chest, not only with hurt, but with a restless attraction that made my skin feel too tight. I hated that my body could want while my mind was grieving. I hated how human that made me. When we got home, the apartment looked offensively normal. Our throw blanket rumpled on the couch, 2 mugs in the sink, Dan's running shoes by the door. Ordinary objects, silent witnesses. Danielle stood in the entryway like she was waiting for a sentence. I set my keys down carefully. Sit, I said, and we sat on opposite ends of the couch like strangers trying to remember the shape of each other. I'm not going to yell, I said. I want to, but I don't think yelling will give us anything except bruises. Danielle nodded, eyes glossy. I deserve it. That's not what I asked, I said gently. I asked for honesty. Danielle swallowed. The truth is, I've been Danielle on and off for years. Before you. I tried to stop when we got serious. I told myself it meant something bad, that it was selfish. But it didn't go away. It came back stronger when I was stressed, when I felt like my skin didn't fit. And you never told me, I said, and my voice sounded like someone mourning something. I was scared you'd leave, Danielle whispered. Or worse, stay and look at me like I was a joke. I stared at my hands. My nails were the same cherry color as my lipstick, glossy under the lamp. I thought about Danielle on stage, lit up like she belonged. My jealousy softened at the edges, turning into sorrow. Do you love me? I asked, because I needed a simple anchor. Danielle answered immediately. Yes, God, yes. Do you want to be with men? The words felt sharp in my mouth, but I forced them out anyway. Danielle hesitated, then nodded slightly. As Danielle, sometimes. Her voice dropped. It's not just the clothes, it's being seen, desired, like I'm real. And me? I asked, heart hammering. Danielle leaned forward, desperation in her eyes. You're not second, she said. You're my home. You're who I want to come back to. I kept it separate because I thought if I mixed them, I'd lose everything. The honesty was both a balm and a sting. I took a long breath. When I saw you up there, I admitted, cheeks warming, I felt turned on. Danielle froze, as if the words were too bright to look at. Not like a spectacle, I hurried on. Not because I think it's hot as a gimmick. Because you looked confident, beautiful, and because it was you, and it made me furious that I didn't get to know you like that. Danielle's eyes filled again, but the tears looked like relief. Cynthia, I'm scared, I confessed. I'm hurt, but I don't want to shove you back into hiding because my fear is loud. I want the truth, even if the truth is messy. Danielle nodded so hard her hair shifted. I want that too, she whispered. I don't want to split myself in half anymore. We talked until the night felt thin and worn. Danielle told me about finding the Blue Canary because it was a place where nobody stared, where people clapped and called her name like it wasn't strange. She told me she'd practiced makeup alone with YouTube tutorials, hands shaking, wiping it off when she heard a neighbor's door. She told me the first time she'd gone out as Danielle, her heart had pounded so hard she'd thought she'd faint. And then a bartender had smiled and said, "What can I get you, honey?" Like it was the most normal thing in the world. She said she'd cried in the bathroom afterward, not from sadness, but from relief. I told her about my jealousy and how it embarrassed me, how possessive I'd felt watching Marcus drape his coat over her shoulders, how I wanted Danielle's attention, wanted to be included, wanted to stop feeling like I lived with a version of Dan that had dimmed itself. At some point, we stopped sitting far apart. We drifted closer without noticing until our knees almost touched. The air between us changed from confrontation to something quieter. Two people deciding not to run. I need boundaries, I said finally, voice hoarse. Real ones, not secret, panic, separate life boundaries, agreements. Danielle nodded quickly. Anything. Not anything, I corrected. Something we both consent to. Something that keeps us safe, because I can't do surprises like tonight again. I can't find out by accident. Danielle's mouth trembled. I understand. So we did the awkward, necessary work. We named what we wanted and what we feared. We wrote rules that weren't about punishment, but about care. Danielle could dress as much as she wanted, at home, out, wherever, so long as we communicated. No disappearing, no vague coworkers when it was really the Blue Canary. If she wanted to see a man, we'd talk about it first and agree. No surprises, no lies, safer sex always, regular testing, no bringing strangers into our home, no emotional deception disguised as privacy. And if either of us felt overwhelmed, we paused and talked before resentment calcified into something sharp. It felt strange, building the blueprint of our relationship out loud. But underneath the logistics was intimacy. The intimacy of saying, here's where I'm tender. Please don't step there. By the time the clock blinked past 2 a.m, Danielle looked wrecked and lighter all at once, like she'd been holding a boulder and finally set it down. I can't believe you're still here, she whispered. I'm here, I said, and I meant it. Not as a promise that everything would be easy, but as a choice in that moment. But you have to meet me in the truth. I will, she said fiercely. I swear. In the weeks that followed, my life changed less like an explosion and more like the steady opening of a door that had always been stuck. The first time Danielle got ready in our bedroom with me there, she was shaking so hard she dropped a lipstick cap on the floor. It clicked against the hardwood like a tiny alarm. She stared at it, frozen, as if the sound had ruined everything. I picked it up and handed it back without making a joke, without trying to lighten it with nervous humor. Danielle's eyes lifted to mine, shocked by the simplicity of my steadiness. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered. You don't have to, I said, just be. She wore the emerald dress again that night, the same one from karaoke. When she stepped out of the bathroom, the lamplight caught the shimmer and turned her into something luminous. I felt that electric pull again, but this time it came with tenderness instead of jealousy. I could feel my own fear inside it too, fear of change, fear of not being enough, but the tenderness held. You're beautiful, I said quietly. Danielle's throat bobbed. You mean that? I mean it, I said, and I'm still scared. Danielle nodded, breathing hard. Me too. We didn't rush. We didn't turn it into a test or a performance. We just held each other, slow and careful, as if learning new gravity. Danielle's cheek pressed to my shoulder, my fingers resting lightly on her back. I felt her breathe, steadying. The Blue Canary became a place I went to eventually. Not right away. I needed time. I needed my heart to stop feeling like it was sprinting. One night, Danielle asked, tentative, would you come with me? Just once? Not to prove anything, just to be there. So I did. We walked in together, and people greeted Danielle like family. Some of them looked at me with curiosity and then warmth. Nobody acted like we were a spectacle. The normalcy of it made my eyes sting. Danielle sang that night and glanced at me mid-song, eyes bright, checking if I was still there. I lifted my glass in a small toast, and I watched her shoulders loosen. She looked different when she knew she wasn't alone. Not just braver, more present. Less like she had to float above her body to survive. After her set, Marcus approached our table. He looked nervous now, which made him seem less like a threat and more like a person. "Hi," he said, careful. "I wanted to apologize if I—" "You didn't," I interrupted gently, because truth mattered. "Danielle didn't hurt me by existing. The lying did. We're working on it." Marcus nodded, relieved. He looked at Danielle. "You were amazing." Danielle smiled, the kind of smile that reached her eyes. "Thanks." On the drive home, Danielle reached over and laced her fingers through mine. "Thank you," she whispered again, as if she couldn't stop saying it because the words didn't feel real yet. Here's what surprised me. My jealousy didn't disappear. But it changed. It became information instead of poison. When Danielle told me she wanted to see Marcus again, the old flare rose, possessiveness, fear, a childish urge to say no just to stop the discomfort. But instead of snapping, I named it. "I'm feeling jealous," I said, voice small and honest. "Not because I don't want you to have this, because I'm afraid of what it means." Danielle didn't roll her eyes or reassure me with empty promises. She came and sat beside me on the couch, took my hand, and asked, "What do you need?" Sometimes I needed reassurance. "Tell me you're coming home to me." Sometimes I needed clarity. "What are you looking for with him?" Sometimes I needed something embarrassingly simple. "Can you hold me for a minute?" And Danielle did, without making it seem like a burden. The openness made everything softer. It made the hard parts survivable. Danielle saw men a handful of times over the next months, always with consent, always planned, always with check-ins. Sometimes it was Marcus. Sometimes it was someone she met through the karaoke crowd. I didn't have to pretend it was easy. There were nights I lay awake with my mind chewing on images I didn't want. There were mornings I needed a long shower because my emotions felt stuck to my skin. But Danielle always came home, not sneaking in at dawn, not pretending nothing happened. She'd come home and sit with me and tell me how she felt, what boundaries had held, what she'd learned about herself, and I'd tell her the truth of my own feelings, even when it was messy. We became fluent in honesty the way you become fluent in a language you once feared, slowly, awkwardly, and then suddenly. Something deepened between us, something that wasn't just, we survived a secret. It was the intimacy of being chosen in full light, the intimacy of being asked, again and again, "Are you still okay?" and being able to answer without lying. Danielle, became lighter, more present. He laughed more easily. He touched me more often, not with desperation, but with joy. And I found myself falling in love again, not with a new person, but with a person becoming whole. One Sunday morning, months after karaoke night, I woke to the smell of coffee and cinnamon. I padded into the kitchen and found Danielle there in soft leggings and an oversized sweater, hair messy, no makeup. She was humming while she flipped pancakes, moving around our small kitchen like she belonged there, which she did. She turned when she saw me and smiled. The smile held both Dan and Danielle at once, familiar and newly open. "Morning," she said. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded, and watched her, my chest filled with something tender enough to ache. "Morning," I replied. "You're staring," she teased, cheeks coloring faintly. "Can you blame me?" I said, and she laughed, warm and unguarded. The sound filled our kitchen like sunlight. After breakfast, she asked if I wanted to go for a walk. The day was pale and clean, early spring trying its best. Trees held tiny buds like promises. The air smelled like wet earth. We walked through a nearby park, passing joggers and parents pushing strollers, passing the kind of ordinary life that used to feel like a given and now felt like something we were choosing deliberately. Danielle was quiet, fingers intertwined with mine. At a small footbridge over a shallow creek, she stopped. Water moved below us, bright and thin. She swallowed hard. "Cynthia," she said, voice tight. I turned, my heart immediately alert. "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "Nothing, not wrong." She took a breath like she was gathering courage into her lungs. Her eyes were already wet. "I've spent most of my life thinking that if anyone saw all of me, they'd leave," she said. "And then you saw me, really saw me, and you stayed. Not just stayed. You met me." My throat tightened. "Of course I did." Danielle laughed weakly, like she couldn't believe I meant it. "It doesn't feel like, of course. It feels like a miracle." She reached into her coat pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out a small box. My breath caught hard. She opened it, and inside sat a ring. Simple, elegant, understated, a small stone that caught the light and threw it back. I'm not perfect, she whispered. I'm not done figuring myself out. But I know this. I want to keep choosing you. I want to keep being honest with you. I want to build a life where we don't hide from each other. Her voice broke. Will you marry me? The world blurred. My eyes filled so fast it felt like my body had been waiting for permission to finally release everything. I let out a laugh that turned into a sob. Are you serious? I managed. Danielle smiled through tears. I've never been more serious. I thought of the first moment I saw her under that karaoke spotlight. The shock, the jealousy, the ache. I thought of the cold streetlight outside, Marcus's coat, the way I'd felt both betrayed and hungry. I thought of the nights since then, the hard conversations, the agreements that were really vows in disguise, the way love had become something we practiced. I stepped closer and cupped her face in my hands. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Danielle exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. She slid the ring onto my finger with trembling care and pressed her forehead to mine. We stood on the bridge while the creek whispered below, while early spring moved around us, while something inside both of us settled into place. I love you, she murmured. I love you, I whispered back. All of you, Dan, Danielle, everything. And I understood something I hadn't known before. Love wasn't the absence of jealousy or fear. Love was the choice to keep showing up anyway, hands open, saying, tell me the truth. I'm still here.